Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My Way, conversations with entrepreneurs doing business outside the box. And frankly, you guys, our guest tonight could have been a fabulous guest on a multitude of our shows, from My Way to Project Joy to the Breakthrough Show. And it just so happens to fit her in well on My Way this evening. So I'm really excited we had the space to get her in this season because she has an incredible story. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to thank you so much for being here this evening. I want to remind you to head over to the comment section, say hello, let us know where you're joining from, whether you're on live or on the replay. And we would love to take your questions and comments throughout the show tonight as well. Our special guest tonight has been an absolute pioneer in the world of women in sales. She is an international best-selling author, an inspirational speaker who broke the barrier of women can't sell by becoming the top producer at every company she ever worked. Please welcome the CEO of Smooth Sale Myth, Elinor Stutz. Welcome, Elinor.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Jessica. It's an honor to be your guest today.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to have you here because as I mentioned to you before we came on the air today, I talk to so many people. I swear networking has become a seventh child for me. But it's something that I do all the time. And our conversation really stuck out to me because, as I mentioned, so many of our shows on the network, whether we're talking about breakthroughs or joy or business or anything, you would have fit so well on any number of those. But I'm excited to share with our audience tonight how you are doing business your way, which you have been for quite some time, since before it was popular, right, Elinor?
Since I was a little kid, I always did things my way.
Yeah, absolutely. Brittany is joining us tonight. Happy Tuesday to you, Brittany. And she says, welcome, Elinor.
Thank you, Brittany.
I'm trying to figure out the best place to start here, but we've come a long way in sales for women, but what were things like when you started in sales? Like, how was the dynamic different then compared to what it's like now?
Okay, well, when I began, the only potential job I could get was to sell an unknown brand of copier door to door. Not what I wanted to do, but I needed to help put children through college, save up for that. And it took 6 interviews, believe it or not, and I finally cornered the director of sales into hiring me. And the entire team otherwise was male, and they all assumed I was just another stupid female destined to fail. Therefore, I didn't deserve training. And it was in the old days of when you cold called in territories. You knocked on doors to get in.
Right.
And the men were handed scripts. And what I've come to learn, I'm going to fast forward for a moment. After reviewing all my awful hardships and disappointments and miserable treatment in corporate, I realized that these experiences are sometimes our gifts in disguise. So what happened, not knowing anything about sales or what I was supposed to sell, an unknown brand of copier door to door, I just went out and I was myself. You see, I'm left-handed, green-eyed, and that's a very tiny percentage of the population. I'm highly creative. So when people invited me in, upon my knocking on doors, I asked them why they invited me in, what caught their interest. And I was kind to the guards with guns, the receptionists, the people walking me down the hallway. Nobody was ever given that kind of respect before, and that was my upbringing, to be kind to everyone. So when we sat down and not knowing how to sell, I asked them how they chose their career and how they got their job, so maybe I'd gain insight on how to get my next job. But we had a wonderful conversation, exchanged stories, and they'd invite me back. Well, by the 4th month, still not knowing anything about how to sell or what to sell, the CEOs of each company where I was invited in said, you better buy from Elinor or you're just wasting valuable company time and I'll fire you. So by the 4th month, I became the top rep, not knowing anything about what I was selling. And boy, was that an embarrassment to the men. And then the games got really ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you showed them up. And the world of selling a copier, I think even thinking of representation of women in sales that we've seen in movies, even into like the 80s, we were seeing, women, anytime we'd see women in sales, they were selling makeup. They were selling, things that were classified as like feminine type products. And so I'm sure that industry brought even another layer of like, this is not things that women would typically be selling.
Right. The games got very ugly. That's all I can say. And year after year, my thanks for bringing Fortune 500 and 100 companies in as clients. I was the first one to do so. Was to give those hard-earned accounts to the men, and my quota tripled for the following year. So year after year, I had to go find another job, and that's how I became almost an expert at interviewing, using sales techniques to sell yourself on interviews. And years later, my community service became teaching job seekers how to sell themselves on interviews.
That's an amazing place to start. Do you feel like, maybe do you feel like the way that women presented themselves or sold themselves in things like interviews had an impact on how many women we saw in sales, or was there just a lot of bias regardless of that?
Oh, a lot of discrimination, and it still exists today. I experienced discrimination in multiple ways. So fast forward to today, I was invited to join Inclusion Allies Coalition, devoted to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I jumped on it, and I'm part of the social media team.
I love that. And it's
always been my fight for equality. I don't know if it's ever going to exist.
Yeah, that was another a question I have for you coming up later on, as well as, we've seen so many changes, but I'm interested later on to hear your perspective on what we still need to do. But at what point did you start to see changes in sales as far as women being involved in the role that women play? And what do you think facilitated that change?
Truthfully, I've networked with a lot of people as an entrepreneur and talked to them about their sales careers, and they encountered a lot of the same difficulties as I did. And even today, I don't know that it's a piece of cake for women in the corporate environment. It may be somewhat better, but I don't think it's near where it should be. I don't think the respect's there. I don't think the promotion possibility is there. I'm sorry, I'm usually a positive thinking person, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think are some of the things then that could facilitate a change? I know that there's a lot of things as far as beliefs where gender roles are concerned that are absolutely generational, things that are passed down. Do you think that we just need to break that thinking, or what, in your opinion, what can be done to facilitate worldwide change?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. I'm reading a lot of articles from psychologists, and they all say, you need the team spirit means including everybody, finding out what kind of career path each team member wants, guiding them to make those goals, set goals, achieve the goals, help them. If you see they're making errors, have a conversation, but don't blame them. Kind of guide them to a better way of doing things, and helping build confidence. It's all about the mentality from people at the top. Are you going to dictate how it's supposed to be, or are you going to help boost people up the mountain to learn? Yeah. So it's the philosophy and thinking from the leadership.
I love that. And I think leadership, working with leadership is absolutely a huge part in this, because if we don't start with the people that are calling the shots, how can we make the difference?
Exactly.
Brittany said women do everything better. She's just saying. And Miss
I won't
Angelique is
argue.
joining us. Yes, right. Hi, Angelique. Good to see you this evening. Listen, if you're just tuning in, we would love for you to say hi, let us know where you're joining from, and all of that good stuff. And chime in on anything we're sharing tonight about sales, women in sales, and changes in leadership. That's what we need this evening. So, obviously, we've said that changes still need to be made across the board, and we talked a little bit about that. I shared earlier that you would have been a fabulous guest on any number of our shows, and one of the shows is the Breakthrough Show, because that's usually where we're talking about stories where something happens and then we have to make a choice and we have to choose to go a different way in our lives. So you broke barriers, and then you broke something else that changed your life. Tell me about a time that you were called the walking miracle, Elinor.
Oh, yes. That I don't wish this on anyone, but it changed my life for the better. After the 11th job, year after year, I decided to take a day off for myself. I never did that. And I was going to go to Stanford Shopping Center. I was stopped at a red light. And unfortunately, but in a way, it was fortuitous in the end. A young mother was talking to her child in the back seat, not paying attention that the light was red, and she slammed full force into the rear of my car. Upon seeing the doctor after that, I told him I could actually feel my brain swaying around in my head. He, of course, didn't believe me. Just another dumb female describing it that way. But I was in terrible pain for 10 years. And 10 years later, almost to the date, it was a rainy night. I was a passenger in the back seat of another car, and the car slowly slid into a lamppost upon making a left turn. And I heard myself timidly say, "You better call an ambulance." Well, the ambulance crew came, got me, took very good care of me. We were on the way to Stanford Hospital. And for a brief second, I thought, oh my goodness, my last ride was with my mother. Is this going to be my last ride too? And in an instant, I changed my thought to positive thinking and kept positive thinking ever since that point in time. And it's essential for achieving what it is we set out to do for ourselves and for communities at large. I said, nope, you're going to be fine. This is your opportunity to finally get worked on and get out of that pain that you've been in for 10 years. So there I was at Stanford Hospital, placed on a stretcher. My family was taken into consulting. And the second they broke into sobs, I know what they were told. I had a near-death experience, and I could not make any of this up. Two visions came to me. The first was in the form of a speaker, and it looked like I was supposed to speak to people far and wide. And in the moment, I said in my mind, yes, that's what I always wanted to do. That first vision faded. A second came up. As the second came up, a brilliant gold light that I'll never forget encased my entire body. And the second vision was my life report card. On the left-hand side, I had high life marks. The right-hand side was a deep embarrassment. It was entitled Community Service. In the moment, I promised to myself and the great beyond that, of course, I'm a salesperson and always negotiating, that if I were able to walk out of the hospital on my own, I would begin giving back to communities any way I could. And I never forgot that promise. That second vision slowly faded. The gold light slowly but surely dissipated. And once it was gone, my family came over to me and I immediately said, go home, get a good night's sleep because I'm going to be fine. Because that blink of a light as the gold light went was a clue to me that I'd be fine. That night, all kinds of things happen. They typically, when someone has a broken neck, they hammer in your forehead with metal screws, believe it or not, a halo, and attached to it is a 5-pound weight. That weight did nothing for me. So out of the blue, a brain surgeon came to the hospital and asked if he could do an experiment on me. And I thought, finally, a brain surgeon. Yes, what have you been waiting for? So he attached 60 pounds of weight. And in the second he did that, I knew I'd be fine. I felt my spine straighten out. Later, it was his students, it was a teaching hospital, came in. He told them what he did, and I could see their eyes almost pop out of their forehead. They couldn't believe he did that. Everything was a clue to me I'd be fine the next day. The next morning, I'm heavily medicated, told I'd have 2 minutes to meet with the surgeon. I was expecting words of encouragement, but being the salesperson, I hear what's not being said, how it's being said, etc. And the surgeon said to me, Mrs. Stutz, when you wake up, most likely you will be paralyzed. And I shot back. Most likely to me meant he didn't expect me to survive. And given what happened the night before, I shot back with every ounce of energy left in me with about 20 seconds to go. Doctor, when I wake up, I fully expect to be well. And the last thing I remember was him jumping backwards before he cut me open. Hours later, he's standing over me and he said, Mrs. Stutz, there's no rhyme or reason for what happened. You will walk out of this hospital on your own in 4 days. And then I was put in a room, and the entire staff that was on duty over the next 4 days came to see me, and one by one, they referred to me as the walking miracle. I had no clue what happened, why they were calling me that, and it took me years to figure it all out. But I never forgot my commitment to community service. As I mentioned earlier, it began with teaching job seekers how to sell themselves on interviews, but then it advanced into different forms. And today I use my blog as a way of helping people advance their careers.
Elinor, do you know why I love it? I have to get comfy for this. Do you know why I love this story so much? Because I cannot tell you, My Way is not one of our most woo-woo shows. We typically don't talk about, the positive affirmations and, all of this stuff in the personal development world, though it is a heavy part of a lot of our guest stories. It's not something we dive deep into, but we talk about on every single one of our shows on this network, the power of positive thinking. And so many people that tune in are just at the very beginning of their personal development journey. And I know what they're thinking because I've been there myself. They're going, yeah, right, Jessica, you cannot just think that it's going to go a certain way. But you've proven that in your story, Elinor.
Yeah, and as I say, I changed my whole way of thinking, and I became a far better person, caring about not just maybe a friend, but caring about communities at large and doing whatever I can to help them advance forward through writing, speaking, etc.
Right. How had that, I know you mentioned the community service and other things. Did that incident directly affect your sales skills at all? And if so, how did that change?
My sales skills were always the same. I was always myself. They talk about authenticity. I think I topped the charts on that one. And when I sell, it's about listening, asking questions, hearing what's not being said, and asking more questions. And then instead of suggesting something, I'll say, have you ever given thought to why or why not? And get the other person to come to the idea that, maybe what she has to sell is a good idea.
I find it really interesting that, I know, having spent a little bit of time in sales myself and my husband being a salesperson, how important it is to listen. And throughout your journey, through all of the breaking your neck and the medical things and all of that, you needed someone to listen to you. And so I find that terribly ironic. And so I'm sure it even subconsciously, it probably solidified how important it is to listen to other people. Grim is joining us this evening. Good evening, Grim. It is good to see you here tonight. All of the ladies that are joining us, by the way, I'm so excited. They're business owners themselves. And so it's really nice to have you here for this conversation. Angelique said 10 years. My gosh. Brittany said, women still to this day have to work harder and less pay. Women are resilient and changes definitely need to be made. We have come far, but we still get unnoticed for many things. Absolutely. And Brittany also said, we create our own reality for sure. So obviously that was a huge, how long ago was that? If you don't mind me asking, all of the
No, it was actually 20 years ago. I've had an extra 20 years of life believing I would be well.
Wow. It's incredible. And so when you, obviously you said you've always been yourself, and you're doing your community service still through your blog and everything else, and staying true to that. You've also become an author, and you have some books. You want to tell us about the books that you have?
Yes, and I want to tell, I never ever envisioned myself as an author. You're going to die laughing. We moved a few times. Yeah, that's the book I'm going to tell you about. I was at a networking event in a big city in California for the first time. I was on stage announcing that I was a sales trainer and speaker. Well, 200 people burst out into laughter at me, not with me. They did, because it was mostly men, and they didn't believe a woman could possibly know enough about sales to be a trainer. And a lot of the women ran away from me shrieking, thinking I'm highly manipulative. Nothing could be further from the truth. Someone kindly took me aside and said, Elinor, to establish credibility, you have to write a book. So I wrote the manuscript about all the awful stories that happen year after year after year in the corporate sales environment. And I changed all the names to protect the guilty. So at the time, self-publishing had just come about. So I did that. And I was so excited to have my self-published copy. I was going to a friend's party one Saturday evening, and I was going to hand each friend a copy of my book, each couple. And one guy, he never liked me, and he was in a really nasty tone, said to me, well, if your book were any good, a publisher would have picked it up. And a smile came over me, and I thought in my mind only, you can eat my dust. And I handed him the book, and I said, here, enjoy it anyway. And I walked away from him. It was unbelievable. The next Monday morning, I went to a new networking event. And at that networking event for the first time was a woman who was just getting started representing authors to publishing houses. I always ask my husband, is it okay if I spend money on this or that, if it's a big amount? But with her, I hired her on the spot. And it broke all records because I was ahead of my time. I didn't realize it at the time. So the book turned into Nice Girls Do Get the Sale, Relationship Building That Gets Results. And almost overnight, Time Magazine picked it up, featured it. It became an international bestseller within a couple of months. Oh, and the other record it broke, the first publishing house said yes. And it soon became an international best-selling book. I was featured on ABC TV News with Spencer Christian. And last year, I got notified that it broke another wonderful record. It became a classic. It's evergreen. It'll never go out of print. So it was all those awful stories that are in my book. And that's why I say I learned that there's a reason why those awful things happen. They guide you to a better outcome.
How do you in the moment deal with that, Elinor? A lot of times on Project Joy, particularly, we talk about, joy isn't always handed to us on a silver platter. Sometimes we have to look for it real hard, real hard. And sometimes we have to be the one to create it. If we don't see it, we have to create it. In those moments that are challenging for you, or even including in this, the fact that we know we still have a long way to go with women in sales, how do you keep grounded and keep moving forward through all of that and keep that positive attitude? Because it's one thing, I think, to say, oh, I need to keep a positive attitude, but what fuels you to keep going in a forward motion?
You won't believe this. I frequently thought about quitting my job, quitting my entrepreneurship. I mean, it happens all the time.
Mm.
But then I review where I started, how far I've come, and do I really want to quit? But underneath all that, I wish I could thank my dad. As a teenager, it was so annoying. Every night at the table, he'd give a motivating talk about athletes who never give up. Somehow it sunk into my brain. So even though I think, oh, it might be time to quit, I know deep down that's something I will never, ever do. And it's the best thing that he taught me was to keep going forward no matter what transpires. You learn from the hard lessons. The hard lessons are your best lessons because it helps you leapfrog over where you were.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And I think that's so true. I'm in the process of writing a collection of short stories about growing up with my grandparents, about things that they taught me without necessarily teaching me. Some of those very dinner table story moments that at the time I'm like, really? Do we have to why do we have to do this? This is horrible. And now I wish they could they're not here with us anymore. I wish they could tell me again.
I know. I wish I could ask questions now as an
Yes.
adult. Yes, exactly.
Yes, absolutely. So I can totally relate to that. And I love that we at least have those memories and can look back on reflection and say, wow, that really had an impact on my direction and where I'm at now and where I'm headed. So for anybody that feels like they are, because of their gender or any other factor which may be considered discriminatory, that is holding them back in sales, what do you feel like is a good maybe best tip or starting point to get them to do things their way, open up a little bit more, or move forward in their sales that they're doing in their business?
Okay. First of all, relax, take a deep breath. I used to exercise before going on an appointment to let some steam out, but it also increased my energy and people loved it when I was talking to them. But the other thing I did the third month, I was always a nervous wreck going into clients the first 3 months. But then I had an opportunity to take a public speaking class, a 3-month long one. The first night, I was so scared I could barely get my name out in front of everybody. By the last night, I was the grand prize winner because everybody ate up the stories. It was, I guess, like a preemptive test to see what people thought about what was happening inside the corporate arena and then outside with my clientele. And I had every time I was up to speak, I had everybody in laughter. And the underlying theme from that class, plus some marketing geniuses I knew through the years, they all said, share your stories, heart to heart, mind to mind. That's what sells best. And so that's what I have always done. So between that and the public speaking training, that will help anyone in any type of career, in my opinion.
I love that. I love that. And I shared with you, at the period of time that I was in sales, first of all, I was very young. And I think that was actually what made me really good at my job then, because I was so oblivious to what we should or shouldn't do in sales. I just kind of was myself. And that was it. Then I think just things adding up over time of like, oh, you shouldn't do that, and you probably shouldn't say that, and you should be acting like this. I think it added these things that kind of held me back a little bit when it came to selling in my business. But I also think that doing these shows the last 4 years and has been in itself like complete public speaking immersion.
Absolutely. You're doing a great job. It's very natural.
I appreciate it. I just like to talk is all it is. But yes, how do you, I want to get into maybe a few like sales tactics kind of things, because I know we've talked a little bit about listening, the importance of listening to our customer or client or our prospective customers or clients. And I also, one of the things that my husband and I go back and forth on in conversation a lot is sort of being a chameleon, always, relating to the person, having something to talk about. When I was doing the telemarketing 100 years ago, I'm showing my age now. No, but we were selling windows and doors to people in the area. And when I would recognize an address that was close to where my grandparents were, I always brought that up of like, oh, do you know Marge and Tony? Because so many people knew my grandparents, and it became this way for us to connect. So that's like literally my only two sales tips from me is to listen and to find something to relate to. But what are some of the other things maybe you do?
Well, I'll tell you how I got started in sales. My mother insisted I go to Girl Scouts, and I didn't want to do that. But then the opportunity to sell Girl Scout cookies came about. So she said, oh, it's not safe to go door to door. You can't do that. I want you to take the afternoon to think about it. And nobody would talk to me when I was growing up because I was stupid, supposedly. So I used to weigh pros and cons of everything. And I thought about the question all afternoon. And at dinner, I said, remember you told me to think about it? And she said, yes. So what did you come up with? I said, well, if it's unsafe to go door to door for Girl Scout cookies, could you explain to me why it's okay for you to go door to door for March of Dimes? And my dad almost fell off the chair laughing so hard. I was 10.
What? How are you still not grounded from that moment, Elinor?
My mother, she didn't know what to do. So the next day we went out, and the very first store was a very heavy set woman, older woman. And she said, honey, I would love to buy the cookies from you, but my doctor told me I have diabetes and I just can't eat sweets anymore. And I stood there, I nodded and I looked at her, and I stood there for a few minutes, and she said, is there a problem or something? Why are you still here? I said, well, I'm just curious. Do you have nieces, nephews, grandchildren? And she said, yes, why? I said, well, don't you think if you kept treats for them in the pantry, they might come visit more often? And she looked at my mother and said, wow, she's good. And she took 10 boxes.
Wow.
So that was the start. Get into the person's mindset. Understand their perspective first. Ask those questions. Always ask why. Why is your best question? And then you can move the conversation forward. Another favorite story was I was going to a city in Northern California, Silicon Valley. And my manager said, don't waste your time. That guy won't buy from anybody except for his favorite vendor, and we're not his favorites. You're just wasting time. I said, I'm sorry, I've got the appointment. I'm not going to give it up just because you said that. So he got really mad at me.
Yeah.
Again, being authentic. So I went, and the office, I always say something nice about the artwork or awards. There was nothing, and there were pipes in the ceiling and cement ground, and it was ugly. And then all of a sudden, I see this picture of a horse on his desk, and not knowing what to say or how to start the conversation, I asked, what's the name of your horse? So he talked for almost an hour about his horse and how he was going to retire on a farm. Next thing you know, the entire city was mine as a client.
Wow.
Just because I asked the name of his horse.
Oh my gosh.
It's that personal connection. It's not the sales jargon. Connect personally, like I said, heart to heart, mind to mind.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about some of that traditional sales jargon. One of my husband's favorite movies, having been in sales as long as he has to do with that one quote. What is it about ABC always be closing?
Yeah, no, don't always be doing that.
I know he's listening right now, so he's going to love that I just threw him under the bus like that. But I think it's so, even today, which is with as much of a push as we've seen on relationship building and networking and all that, we still see those really hard, cold sales techniques. Are we ever going to get out of that? Elinor, give us some positive thinking here, please.
I sure hope so. I have a car sales story that will have to.
Uh-oh, honey. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take myself off the screen for this one. My husband's about to
Oh,
hear
you want to
it.
hear it? We wanted to buy our son when he was a teenager a car that was sturdy. And this manager on a car lot had his private car for sale, and it was the type we wanted, and we know a good mechanic who specialized in that make. So we took it for a test drive, and it stalled at every single red light. And we thought, oh, this is awful. So came back to his office and told him what happened. It was like I wasn't driving properly.
Oh boy.
I said, oh, really? Do you want to come with me? So I shamed him into going for a car ride with us. And sure enough, it stalled at every light. We go back into his office. I said, when was the last time you had this car serviced? And he turned pale. And I said, I'm not going to pay you what you're asking for this car. I know a good mechanic who can fix it, and I'm still interested. But it's the down economy. Nobody's going to pay you what you're asking. And I offered a very small amount. And I said, I'll even go the ATM. It's across the street, and I'll get dollar bills for you in singles and pay you that way if you want a high pile of money on your desk. But that's all I'm paying. Take it or leave it. And you'll never guess what happened. My son was there to testify to this. He started literally banging his head up and down on his desk, yelling, why me? And I said, I can tell you why, because you're being unethical and you think you can get away with, asking far too much money because I'm a female, but I happen to be a smart female who is in sales. So I got the car for what I offered, walked away. A week later, I get a phone call. You'll outsell every man on this floor. Will you come work for me? I said, no, thank you, and slammed the phone down.
Of course you got a job offer after. Oh my God. Elinor, I think you are seriously the most gutsy guest we have in the history had on any of our shows, period. End of story.
Well, I want to tell you something. When I was growing up, it was with bullies. And when I was 4, it was really bad at 4 in kindergarten. A kid threw sand in my eyes at the sandbox. I came home crying. And my dad said to me, if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. You have to start taking the reins. Age 4, that was the lesson. By 5, someone else tried the same thing, and boy, was he sorry.
I bet.
And I never looked back.
Oh my gosh. I listen, I have determined I will not be surprised by any more stories you tell this evening.
You have to stand up for yourself. As my dad said, no one else will. You have to demand equal treatment. But don't respond nastily. Respond in a kind voice, as cheerful as you possibly can, with questions, and set them back on their heels. Yeah. That's the way it's done.
I love that. I love it. It sounds like your dad was a huge impact on you in many ways. And
I didn't know it at the time, but in my older years, I came to realize it. Yes.
I love that. I love that. Speaking of standing up for yourself, let's talk for a moment about rejection, which we are not a stranger to in the world of sales. How have you dealt with that over the years, and how do you sort of process that when you're talking to other people about sales?
Oh, okay. So I was told the best salesperson earns 30%. That means they're turned down 70% of the time. So, I mean, it's hard for people to get accustomed to that. So what I did, I made a game out of it. And I'd ask, is your no, I appreciate your no, and I fully understand. Is it forever? Don't ever darken your doorstep again? Is it not now? I need to get the money in the budget. Do you want me to call you back in 6 months, in a year, next month, next week? Please tell me what you have in mind so that I won't harass you. And a lot of them that really was going to be a firm no were taken aback that I was so open about it and agreeable that they said, wow, you're really unique. Why don't you call me back next month or next quarter? I'm going to talk to the manager and see if we can get it in the budget and go with you. Because I wasn't hammering the sale. I was trying to work with their agenda. And that's the differentiator. So the other way of looking at no, accept it and don't waste your time. Your time's valuable. Use it where people are more inclined to move forward. And I'll tell you another funny story. This was my 4th year of selling. It was my best job. I was finally going to talk to a female manager, and I thought, oh, finally. She was the rudest person I ever encountered. So after the call, I wrote a handwritten note, an old-fashioned thing to do, plus an email, and said, I appreciate your time. I'm sorry I can't help you, because there was no way I wanted to waste my time working with her.
Right.
But then I said, but I know someone who'd be the perfect candidate for you. He was the most obnoxious person I ever met. So I introduced him to her. You'll never guess what happened. A month later, they're both on the phone, and it sounded as if they were dating. They were thanking me for the introduction.
What? Well, I guess even the rude and obnoxious people need each other. That's so funny. That is incredible. I love that, though, as well, about just accepting, because the more time we spend trying to convince people, the less time we have to find those right matches, the people that are, open and aligned to what we're doing, right?
Exactly. And if you think you made an error, don't beat yourself up. Figure out what the error was and how to avoid it in the future.
I love that. So obviously you were doing door-to-door sales we heard the Girl Scout story. So you've been doing that a long time.
In the beginning, and with the copier in the beginning, after
Right.
that it became a little more sophisticated, where you made a lot of cold calls on the phone, and then email came in, and CRM came into being, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, this comment is coming in at the perfect time for the question I have. Grim said, these are all many reasons why I like to meet with people on video so that we can connect better. How has the online world, with this video chatting and all of this that we have now, Zoom meetings, all of that, how has that changed the sales industry overall, and then maybe for women as well?
For me, it was better. I was an early adapter of social media because I could meet people globally. I love travel. And then when Zoom was announced, I became a beta tester.
Wow.
And I love it because I'm a visual. So I like to see people as they speak, take in their gestures, their vocabulary, all of it. And I love Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I was very, very similar to that when people started having podcasts and shows and things like that. I was much more drawn to a video show like this rather than a podcast, because I'm also a visual learner, and I love, like you, to take in the gestures and the facial expressions and all of that. Grim said they're micro expressions. You kind of for me, you can feel their energy even more with the video as well. So I love that increased for you. And that's so fun that you got to be a beta tester for Zoom is when they got started.
Yeah, it's exciting. Someone about 2 years ago asked, have I heard of Zoom? I just started laughing. It's another white male talking down to females.
Have you ever heard of Zoom, Ellen?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
They would shake your head. Seriously, that's what you're asking me?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I've taken so many notes, and I hope you ladies that are in business, or any of you that are in sales or have sales as part of your business, have been taking notes this time. So many of our viewers that are watching are in personal development or spiritual development line of work, and I find especially the spiritual development folks, my Reiki practitioners out there, a lot of us that have a struggle in the sales world, because we just want to serve, we just want to make a world of shiny happy people, but we know in order to do that we have to sell, we have to, but we don't want to. we don't want to. So what do you say to those of us
Well, I have
service
to
minded?
tell you, I've been an entrepreneur on and off throughout my life. And I had a word processing business before I went into sales. And one night, my husband comes home, my back's to him, I'm typing, and I couldn't believe my ears. He said, "Elinor, I know what you should do for a career. You have the personality of a salesperson." I got up, I looked him square in the eye, and with a quiet voice asked, "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Well, the rest is history, and it was true. It's just natural for me.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I'm sorry, what was your question? That just came up.
No, that was fine. That's the direction it needed to go. But I think when we're talking about the folks that are service minded in spiritual based businesses, like what would you say to them that they're like, listen, I love what I do, but I just can't sell. It's just not part of who I am.
Yeah, okay. So just be you. As I said earlier, authenticity is the key word today. Just be yourself. Listen, and the other thing I was going to say was, do you ever invite someone to a movie or to dinner? Does that ever occur? You have to sell the reason why they might want to go with you. Their favorite actor, their favorite food, great location for the restaurant. You give the reasons why. You're selling, whether you know it or not. We all sell our ideas, but you do it low key, laid back. It doesn't have to be cutthroat.
I love that. I love that. So many good ideas. Before we talk about, I'm going to pull up your website here in a minute for everybody to see so that they can go check it out. You mentioned earlier that you were ahead of your time. Do you feel the weight of that responsibility ever, Elinor? Does it feel like a responsibility to you?
No, for a long while, I didn't even realize it. I thought, what's wrong with everybody? Why would you want to be a secretary or just get married to have a man support you? That was the time of the day that I was growing up. I wanted to be in business, and that was unheard of. But I never felt I was ahead of my time then. It's looking back that I realized that was the case. And in some ways, I still am. I became known as a top 1% influencer because I was an early adapter of social media. I just like new technology and new ways of doing things. And I just find it fascinating to see the developments that we have going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, it is amazing to see how much you have impacted this world of sales, and yet you're still so humble about it, and still so like, I'd be interested to see even years from now whether that perspective changes at all, of going like, maybe it'll just hit you like, I've changed the whole thing.
No, I'm just thrilled. It's part of the community service, as I mentioned, and I started writing my blog and began expanding outward to ask leaders from various fields to share their story about how they got into their field and advance their career so that readers can more easily advance theirs, hopefully. And over time, it became popular. But when I'm doing my work, I never think of myself as ahead of the time. But looking back, I realize I probably am.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would love for everyone to head over to your website and check that out, which is smoothsail.net. Can you tell everyone, Elinor, what they can find there?
Yes, as you can see, I focus on the blog primarily. The two pictures are for different blogs. I have collaborative blogs, guest blogs, and I do my own. In the right-hand column, there's blurb about my book. I have a speaker sheet on the right, and an interview with Spencer Christian is down below. But there it is. And then there's a little bit about me, and then a page to my Amazon books.
I love
And
it.
my tagline is breaking barriers, because that's what I've always done. When I hear you can't, my thinking is just watch me. Yes, I can.
I
Don't
love
hold me
that.
back. You can't hold me back.
Yes. I hope that people leave here today thinking that, realizing that, knowing that nothing needs to hold them back. So one of the final questions I love to ask our guests is about this concept of doing business their way. There are a lot of people that are being told this is the way that you have to do things. This is the template that you must follow. This is the work that you must do. And there's a lot of people, I think, that still feel very held back by the idea that they can break the mold. They can do things their way. So if someone is saying that today, Elinor, if they're watching this and they're going, yeah, that's all wonderful, but I don't feel like I can do things my way, what would you say to that person?
Give it a try and see what happens.
Hmm.
One time, this is a funny story that just came to mind. I went to the SBA in California, and I was talking to somebody. I was thrown out of a chamber of commerce because somebody who was in there long term was jealous, I think, that I was taking her clients away. So I was thrown out. I went to the SBA, and the woman happened to tell me she was from Peru. Well, in college, I had taken Quechua, language of the Incas, and I memorized one sentence. So I said to her, suddenly, my tata jrinka kuyan. She almost fell off her chair. That translates to, where does this narrow road lead to? And then she gave me all kinds of leads for business. It was incredible. And we became friends after that.
Wow. Wow.
So do things your way. That's another example of doing it my way.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we just need to put ourselves out there. By the way, my husband just figured out how to finally get to the chat, and he's been texting me this whole time following along, and he figured out how to pull up the chat on his phone. He never uses his phone except to watch my shows, so he just figured it out. So I know he said he's really been enjoying hearing from you all. And you guys have so much in common, being in sales for so long. So I love that as well. Elinor, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing your perspective with us.
It was a treat talking with you, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me as your guest. It was probably one, well, I won't say it, but it was a fabulous opportunity and hour. Thank you so much. And I'd be happy to speak with your husband one day too.
Absolutely. I think that would be a fun conversation. We'll have to on our way up to the Northeast. We always drive because we like to take the kids on a whole thing. So we'll drive up through Virginia and we'll come and we'll do dinner. That would be fun.
If you come to Virginia, perhaps we can meet.
Yes, that would be amazing. I keep saying I need to do like a breakthrough tour because I have so many friends now. Well, people that I consider my friends after this, after fun interviews, and I love hugs and getting to finally meet in person and all of that. So I think that would be a lot of fun. And my husband agrees. See, dinner it is. So we're gonna do it.
This was a fabulous experience for me too. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elinor, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for watching or listening wherever you are in the world today. I want to remind you that coming up tomorrow morning on Project Joy, we have another wonderful friend of mine. Scott Mason is going to be on the show tomorrow, and he's going to be talking about toxic myths and how they're holding us back. Scott's an incredible speaker, and I can't wait for you guys to hear from him from him. Tune in tomorrow at 7 a.m. Central Time, bright and early, starting your day with a triple shot of good vibes. Thank you again, Elinor. Thank you all of you for watching or listening. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to remind you to do business your way. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.